Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am Hector Colonis, and this is your weekly recap for week 4 of 2026. I am joined by an amazing co-host today, Christina Schneider from Cobot. Christina, how are you?
Very good. Thanks so much, Hector. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for joining us. I can't believe the first time we've had you on the podcast.
I know.
Unbelievable, but definitely not the last time we're going to get you on here for sure. We have a fantastic episode this week. We had an action-packed newsletter this week. If you do want to follow along from home, head over to thisweekincoworking.com and click on week 4 of 2026. So Christina, we saw quite a lot in the newsletter this week. We saw some great information shared by Cobot. We saw a 40-page report that I shared back in 2016. We looked at an AI OS. We looked at Kat Johnson's idea of how you should be building community as opposed to forcing it. And then we also saw an idea of how best to approach growth. But before we dive in, this week's sponsor is our lovely friends at Cobot. Christina and the team, thank you for supporting the newsletter, the podcast, the game. All of Twig is supported by Cobot this week, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity. We are great supporters and readers and listeners of This Week in Coworking.
Great to have you here, and once again, thanks for the support. So Cobot shared this week that, hey, we're Cobot, we've been building some great things, but what we've been building is more important than the fact we've been building things. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Cobot focused on building and releasing or updating?
Sure, yeah. So last year for us was really driven by a few product thoughts that we kept coming back to. And one was really going back to our customers that are successful with us and figuring out what exactly is their product portfolio in 2025. And does Cobot support all of it? And do we do it really well? Because what we want to be really for them is being a growth platform. So a lot of our year was spent on reviewing especially our on-demand products and figuring out how our customers can put their offers to their coworkers and how Cobot can make that really easy and intuitive for them. Because we've been doing this from the beginning, but there was sometimes some friction. It wasn't quite up to our standards, right? So that was a big part of the year, making sure that just really flows, and the time from having a product idea, trying to roll out a new co-working product, is super smooth, bringing that to your customer. And one huge part of that was revamping our dashboards, providing different dashboards for the different roles, because we see teams are growing, roles are specializing in our spaces. And yeah, that was where our attention was really for a big part of the year.
I mean, it's a really interesting list because almost every company and co-working tech company was releasing updates last year. A lot of them were focused on specific new trends. A lot of things were trying to enter new verticals. But what I hear from you is a lot of your releases were driven by customer need as opposed to what is happening in the outside market. Just for a bit of background for folks who maybe haven't heard about Cobot for whatever reason, how long has Cobot been running as a co-working software solution?
Oh, for such a long time that I always have to calculate. And so we really started with the beginning of the co-working movement. We had our own space open 2008 in Berlin, really when the word co-working even was just emerging. And back then we were a software development agency, and Cobot became our product built out of that. So that's also a thought that we have drawn back to a lot in the last year, thinking about our roots, so to say, and really zooming in on the core of our customers, which are co-working spaces. Some of them might call themselves flex office or have some other name, but really co-working is the word and the kind of product that we're building for.
You've also shifted, there's been a big shift in the way Cobot presents itself over the last at least 12 to 18 months. Most notably, your recent announcement of your updated mobile app was very newish for Cobot, at least from what I remember from seeing your releases. It was a video of, I think, Rosie and Georgie trying to get into the same meeting room or the same podcast booth. Great video, go back and look at that, listeners. Am I correct in picking up that there is this shift kind of going back to that roots of being even more approachable, even more tongue-in-cheek around the way you describe your products?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so lucky to have Georgie and Rosie help us with that and bring this kind of both this fresh idea, this fresh vibe back into our communication, and by that also reviving something that I think was already ingrained in our communication when we started out. But yeah, I also love that video. I'm glad you picked it up. Definitely was a nice way for the team to end the year with this kind of lighthearted way to look at our big mobile app release and bring it to our customers with this little storytelling around it.
It was great, and I've definitely shared it more than a few times since you guys have released it.
Thank you.
Great work on that. It was also good to see the focuses have been on kind of making the operational side better. Yes, the mobile app was for making the users have a better experience, but that is also taking that load off of the community manager. The amount of spaces I've been in where it's like, oh, can you book that meeting room for me? Can you do this? Can you go do my invoice? That kind of offloading onto the user is improving the operational experience for the operating team, but also the dashboarding, the allowing more on-demand bookings is really that refocus back into the fact that software is supposed to be this invisible layer that makes operating a business better, makes running a business more efficient. I think somewhere in the newsletter there this week there was something around operation is just hospitality with better software. That was from a piece about a bartender who became a community builder. Go read that as well. I just love that idea of software really being this enabler, and I think that is where Cobot sits, at least from the spaces I've spoken to. The fact that you guys are at every conference, you're at the tables, you're having conversations with people, it's a big part of Cobot, so I'm glad that we get to highlight that a bit for folks who maybe haven't engaged with you guys for a while. Definitely reach out and speak to the Cobot team about what they're up to. I have a question for you though, because we're going into 2026 and there's 2 letters on everyone's mind. There is a story in this week's newsletter about this development firm and co-working space building an AI-powered operating system for co-working, in which people talk to a chat interface and then things happen in the space. Book meeting rooms, issue an invoice, stuff like that. As a team who's very product focused, where does AI sit in your current and future plans?
Yeah, we cannot not talk about AI, can we? When we talk about software.
Unfortunately, yes.
Of course, the team for a while has been very excited, very skeptical too. We're definitely intend to continue having discussions about where and how to use AI, both in our internal workflows as well as in our product. We're organizing internal hack days around AI where we try quick experiments, both for internal facing workflows, but also for features. What we've definitely been doing and what is benefiting us and extension our product a lot is building prototypes fast, building little experimental features shared with just a few customers, often in person, right on the device. Thanks to AI, the entire team is empowered to do that now, not just the developers. In the past, experiments like that were really costly. Now we can run them within a day and get really good results, really good feedback quickly. So that's something I'm really grateful for and really excited about, that we can increase the quality of our product so much quicker.
Yeah.
In terms of bringing AI features to the product that our operators see is something we're consciously holding back a little bit and observing how the market moves and what's even possible, especially considering we're in the EU, which comes with a lot of extra data protection laws and regulations that we have to keep in mind. What I'm hoping to see happening and what we're currently experimenting with is reducing the amount of hours one can spend poking around in dashboards, drilling into data, exploring, and then getting frustrated if this one certain bit of data, for whatever reason, isn't there for you. And I think that's something where AI can absolutely help us to create much quicker, more intuitive, focused interfaces that dig into the data in new ways. So that's something we're observing. Another really interesting aspect is what some years ago the project or feature of us was to really improve the SEO of the products that our spaces have on our platform, so their customers can find it. Except now they're not Googling anymore, they're talking to an AI, probably asking where is the meeting room I want right now. So that's something we're experimenting with as well. ChatGPT, for example, already offers the possibility to build apps within their system. And how can we be there? How can all the products that our spaces have on Cobot appear when someone talks to their AI?
You ticked on 2 topics that I'm absolutely focused on. That is definitely this idea of agentic commerce, right? I think we're going to get to a place where a calendar agent will be booking the meeting rooms for people. And if you're not able to transact with an AI system, are you leaving money on the table? So the fact that you're looking into that, I think, is a great element. But you also touched on this idea of kind of citizen coders, whereas your sales teams can kind of build up dashboards or views or prototypes, run them past customers, and get quick feedback before giving it to the engineering team or the tech team to implement, which is great for like a tech company. Are you concerned at all with kind of the vibe coding in this space where operators are like, yes, we can show you what we want by building you an MVP and saying, hey, can you add this to Cobot? But on the flip side, they're like, well, we can just build a standalone on its own app. And I mean, you've been in co-working longer than I have, and we've definitely been through that cycle of everyone wanting to build their own co-working software and eventually coming out of that cycle. Are you worried at all that vibe coding might throw us into the next cycle of everyone trying to build their own co-working software without thinking about, e-invoicing and compliance and privacy and all those things? Like, what is your thoughts around that as kind of a product leader?
Yeah, I love that question because I also go through exactly that train of thought in cycles from being quite worried about feeling very reassured that, I don't think that's happening exactly. What we are definitely seeing, which I love, is the part of our customers that's already quite tech savvy, quite experimental, loves to work with our API, build their own extensions. They're just much more empowered, and they also build better ideas, better integrations quicker. We try to keep a very close connection to them to also see, is that something even worth integrating in our product? Or is that something that should remain an integration that is kind of a one-off use case? But in any way, the outcome for our customers is a better product. So that's a win for everyone. They're still happy with Cobot if it still serves their needs and frees up their time for other things to do, but software, right? I think vibe coding concerns me as well in an internal workflow, seeing how that also goes from this incredible adrenaline rush and excitement about, wow, we can build things so quickly now, to also the learning, but you need other checks, you need other structures to then deal with that speed of development and really make sure the quality remains.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we consistently see in the day job over at Syncaroo is there's this constant question of, do you enable front of house staff, the teams, people on the ground to be able to vibe code? If you don't, will they go somewhere where they can? And if you do, how do you make sure it connects with all your systems, data is integral, the integrity of the data is consistent? All of those questions are currently stirring around many boardrooms, especially here in the US. I'm pretty sure the conversations are even more about compliance in the EU, but we're hearing this buzz of people feeling empowered. But you're absolutely right, it has to be done right. And it's just going back to the story in the newsletter about this AIOS, right? Like, unless there are checks and balances and kind of repeatability or replays of what agents are doing or putting out, there is the missing person in the middle, right? I'm all for it, and we're going to get to a point where we can talk to our platforms and apps become APIs and all of that lovely stuff. But I think we're still trying to run before we're walking. We're very much in the beginning of that, .com bubble where you don't need to have a website just for diapers, right? You don't need that. But we're in that phase now of kind of experimentation. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I'll be watching, obviously, the platform with the AI interface and see how it rolls out. It's going to get launched in a couple of weeks. It'll be in the newsletter as well. But let's take it back to kind of actual operations in a co-working space. Kat Johnson shared a piece talking about how there's a difference between bonding community and bridging community in co-working spaces, really leaning into the fact that, are you building a community that reinforces sameness, or are you a community that invites growth? And they're they sound similar, but they're very, very different. Now, Christina, I know that you also, as you said, ran co-working spaces. So what are your thoughts around this piece when it comes to building events? What did you think about when you were planning your events?
I found this dichotomy of concepts that came up with there just a super helpful question, and I hadn't heard it phrased like that before. Because certainly when I ran events, which were mostly tech, product, community networking events, I got so obsessed with making sure any person that comes in is right away feeling well integrated and included. So Kat's piece definitely reminded me of the questions and the challenges we faced back then when organizing these events, and especially the German tech scene can be quite shy, not very naturally good at bringing new people into a conversation. So I started to think about little examples, little stories. And one practice I've been seeing and practicing at my own events as well is, as a facilitator, even at the very beginning when you welcome people or when you open the event, you can set the tone and giving little reminders. And one super simple trick is to remind people to keep the circle that you form when you're in a conversation just one spot open, which is so simple but so effective. So just leave this one empty spot, and when you observe this kind of in a room, how it works really well, it helps to avoid that people stand alone in a corner and don't do this extra step to join the conversation.
That's so cool. And it can also be, it can also be used in a co-working space. I've seen so many times where people kind of all swarm around one set of open desks or hot desks. And then there's that one person who's kind of walking around trying to find somewhere to sit. But if that one seat was left open, that's a whole different way to open up the community. I love that point. I'm sorry, you were going to say another point.
Yeah, really just that going from these small examples, which is kind of what the on-the-ground staff has to implement and never let go of, right? Just always keep these little best practices in mind, come up with new ideas that match your space. And I believe if you follow that, you can really get to the point where you build those bridges. So yeah, I love that article. I think it's a good reminder to check daily with yourself. Are we building bridges for people? Is something are we just calling it inclusion, or are we actively thinking about how to build that?
Yeah, and for like the operators or the people managers listening in, if you find your teams are not doing that, looking at why is also a really good question. Why aren't you remembering these little points? No one maliciously doesn't want to build community. Oftentimes, there's another article saying how community managers are burned out, they're overwhelmed, they have 600 tabs open, they have to-do lists that roll off the side of their desk. It's very hard to ask people to build bridges and create inclusive communities when they're so overwhelmed. So oftentimes, it's not a community challenge, it's an operations challenge. So if you do see that these cracks are forming or these communities are not as bridged as you'd like, ask the question why. And you'll probably find that by making certain steps, implementing the right technology, the right automation, you can enable them to build better bridges, because now they have time to breathe, they have time to think, they have time to look up from their screen and see that the member is sitting by themselves for the third day, or see that at the event people are not kind of holding that extra space. So I do want to hit that point home as well. We have two more pieces I kind of want to dig into with Christina. The fastest path to kind of industry growth, and the other was looking back at my very, very short report from 2016. Where do you prefer we go? As the co-host, I'll let you drive.
Oh, I'd love to end with the 2016 one, because I think that's such a good one. So we can look first at industry growth.
Perfect. So this article was by Carolina at Piloto Mail. She looked into some learning she had having stepped into the head of growth role over at Piloto Mail. And she really looked at the fact that everyone thinks of sales in our industry, not only from software, but also selling co-working space, as chase the deal, always be closing, the whole Wolf of Wall Street type vision of the sales room. And it's not like that, right? People are so overwhelmed with choice. There are so many different pieces of software out there. There's so many different types of co-working out there. So this parallel between selling both software and co-working space from a place of empathy is just such a good reminder for all of us who are in the business essentially of creating solutions. We're not in the business of selling desks or commoditizing Wi-Fi. We are selling outcomes, and we often forget that when there's quotas to meet, there's competitive sales process, there's enterprise deals, all these things that are happening, we kind of forget that we're actually just here providing a solution to a person or a team or a company. What did you take away from this piece?
Yeah, you're completely right here. I was actually thinking I need to meet Carolina. I never have in person. I think we have a similar approach at Cobot to work really closely with our customers and make sure to make the conversation with them a long-term project. we know from experience we usually don't sell something in the moment. I really believe, I think Carolina even called it education. That is something you need to take on if you want to build successful relationships and eventually come to a business relation with a potential customer too. One thing we do for sure is we're just really clear and upfront about what we are and also what we are not. And we try to get this out of the way quickly. It's sometimes just not a match. And Carolina pointed out the overwhelm that space operators are feeling anyway. Most people are feeling in their really busy work lives, right? So save down the time and make clear right away if you're a match. And if you are, then you enter this process of educating each other about what you need and coming to a good outcome together.
I think it's a very good point, and it's definitely something that I've had many conversations with sales leaders where junior salespeople or people new to the industry, both on the software side and co-working, try to close every deal. And when you're trying to close every deal, you're not self-selecting, and you're also wasting time on deals that aren't a good fit, as you said. Not everyone needs your particular software. Not everyone is a good fit for your co-working space. And knowing that, how to kind of figure that out early on is going to allow you to spend more time with the customers or prospects that get it or need it, or you can educate each other and learn from their business. There are so many different types of businesses now using co-working. So understanding how a microbiotech startup would want to use your co-working space compared to a collective of independent freelancers creating a proposal for a government contract or something, they're going to use your space in very different ways. Just like a co-working space for labs and a co-working space for fashion are going to use your software in different ways. Having that conversation, educating them about your software, about your solution, about your co-working products, but also learning from them about you thought or they thought they needed hot desks, but they actually needed a suite, or you thought they needed a suite, but they just need breakout spaces. They need a fractional office. So have those conversations, especially from my side, having shifted from CTO role to head of sales at Syncaroo. This has been the biggest wake up for me, where I was like, oh, no, it's just a tech solution. Like, do you need it or don't you need it? But having those conversations, like, where does the value actually sit with you? And how does it connect to the rest of your objectives, your goals, has definitely made sales a lot easier. It's not always easy. Obviously, selling software solutions in co-working is never easy, but it has definitely been a learning curve. So I totally am over the moon that both you and I picked this as one of the topics to dig into. And given that Twic's all about connecting people, I'm definitely going to make sure that you and Carolina are in the same room at some point.
I'd love that.
We'll definitely make that happen. Alrighty, let's round out with a look back at a decade younger Hector's views on co-working. So for folks who don't know what we're talking about, back in 2016, a very large UK property owner was exploring how to enter co-working or how to start a co-working concept. In 2013, 3 years earlier, I had started my first co-working spaces, so they reached out and they were like, can you tell us what the biggest trends are, both tech and operations-wise, in co-working? I didn't understand the idea of giving actionable insights in a digestible format, so I put together a 40-page report for them, looking at the emerging trends that I thought were pretty interesting. I happened to stumble across this report a couple of days ago, and I was like, I wonder if any of this holds up, right? I don't remember what I put in there. It's 40 pages long, so I did what every sane millennial or a tech person would do. I threw it into ChatGPT, and I'm like, extract the main points from this piece, summarize them into kind of bullet points, and then compare that to the This Week in Co-working Digest, but also the general LLM database, and tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 how these topics aged well or aged like sour milk. And I was gonna say surprised, because I did not expect them to land up as well as they did, but a lot of those topics ended up being pretty on par. 10 years later, things that I thought were new and innovative are now table stakes. If you do not focus on these things, everyone else already is. You kind of have to. And it was just very interesting to look at this difference and shift over kind of what was new 10 years ago and what is now table stakes. But since I'm a little bit biased, Christina, I'm going to hand it over to you. What did you take away from this post?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your ability to predict the future. I was so impressed to, first of all, the idea to hop on the 2016 take a look back routine. Then you had this report back then, and then it held up so well. So yeah, what stood out to me in general is that you were right, and or the report was right, and definitely the part about not locking yourself into technology. Of course, I had to pick up the technology bit.
Of course.
I think that has been true back then and didn't maybe seem so clear why it was, but now after 10 years, yeah, obviously. Because one of the things that is evolving so quickly around us, around the spaces we operate, is technology.
Mm-hmm.
Question back for you, actually. Was there one that has stood the test of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was this idea that IT was not a product, but a level of hospitality. At the time, back in 2016, this idea of seamlessly connecting to the Wi-Fi, having your door access given to you was like so foreign. Now everyone got key fobs, everyone got a little RFID card when they signed up for a space. And you had an IT department with a server room, and people would plug in different cords when it was kind of setting up the Wi-Fi back then. And I was just like surprised that I saw it, given that I was not in the tech space back then, right? I was running Included at the time. We were doing perks programs for co-working space. The most we interacted with technology was like light integrations with the inventory systems. So I was really surprised that I'd seen that, but I didn't realize it until 2019 that this was the big shift. So I kind of sniffed around it, but wasn't accurate enough that I was like, oh, this is the big opportunity. And I think that the other one is this idea that at the time, community managers, especially the large brands, and this was a large brand, were very much glorified receptionists. And I say that with as much respect to the people. They were just not given the authority or the autonomy to really be operational leaders. This kind of goes back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, is like the next generation are going to come in, just like we entered the workforce kind of web enabled and web native. The generation that followed us came in kind of mobile native. They knew how to use their phones better than we could imagine. The next generation is going to be AI native. And they are going to be able to do things and spin things up and automate things in ways that we haven't even thought about yet, because that's just the way that they think about work. And I think that this is a shift that's going to go probably deep into 2036. If I had to make a prediction for that, is it's just going to be a lot more AI nudges in our workday as opposed to doing the tasks for us. We're going to see this going back to kind of the main crux of the report, is that the whole point of co-working is to create moments of delight. These little instances that used to be frustrations if they were anywhere else in the world, you make them delightful. The printer's not working, they press a button, a team rocks up, the printer's now working. You take a frustration and you create a moment of delight. Someone can't get into the building, they open their phone, now they can tap to get in. The security, the lights are not going off, there's a button that says, I'm in the office, keep the lights on. It doesn't keep switching off every 30 minutes after 5 p.m., which was a big trend back in 2016. I think what we're going to see next is using this amalgamation and depth of data to really create even better moments of delight. So enabling those community managers to really step up their game, because they're now being fed nudges by their data sets. So being able to know, this is the 200th time that Christina has come to this space. But that data already exists in your various databases, in your CRM, in your inventory system, in your social feeds, in your apps, in your Slack channels. All of this data exists, but it's not ready yet to nudge us to create more moments of delight. So I think that is what like the biggest through point is that I look back at 2016, that's kind of why I looked it up, is I was like, I talked about moments of delight at some point in my life. Where was that? So that's how I landed back on this article. I put this together, and then I was like, oh, there's a trend of looking back 10 years. I didn't even realize before I published it. So I'm glad that I landed on the trend by mistake. What are your thoughts around kind of this idea of creating nudges towards moments of delights?
Again, I'm reflecting how similar it is, or how this can be applied to both running a co-working space, running a successful community-driven workplace, and building software building user experiences. Because I guess in the end, it's all about the experience, right? And delight is funnily one of our design team's guiding principles as well. Like search for these moments where can we put this little bit of extra on just a very functional, very usable flow. But we're talking about software, not like a human connection or co-working space. But even in software, can I maybe make the day of our user a little bit brighter? Maybe they're even smiling because the thing was so easy.
Yep.
And they now have 5 extra minutes because they have all the data they need for the meeting to talk with their staff, to review something and have time for an extra coffee. So yeah, I definitely agree with delight is hopefully a trend, or not a trend, just like a constant in our industry that we should strive for.
I love that, and I can totally imagine that Cobot is busy tracking or at least monitoring the repetitive steps people are taking. Because I can totally see, a year from now where that every Monday someone is building the same report. But then at 7 a.m. on a Monday, they walk into the office and there's an email from Cobot saying, here is that report you normally generate. Little things like that, taking that traditional software approach and turning it into moments of delight. I cannot wait to see operators experience more moments like that from their software for their members. This was a delight, Christina. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Thank you for sharing so openly and honestly. If anyone wants to reach out to you or the Cobot team, where can they do that?
Thank you so much. I love getting messaged and to be found on LinkedIn. That's where I am. That's where people can always connect with me.
Fantastic. I will make sure that your co-working leader profile has a link to your LinkedIn as well. So feel free to connect with Christina there. We will be back in the podcast feed in a couple of days with your next podcast drop. Once again, Christina, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.